Has anyone else ever met a fisherman on Route 3 in New Hampshire? I know it's a bit of a long shot, since the area I'm talking about is pretty rural and pretty far north, but I figure it can't hurt to see if any of you guys know what I'm talking about. My dad and I have a casual tradition of going up to my grandmother's old place in northern Vermont to spend a long weekend fishing. When I was in school, it was always Labor Day weekend, but nowadays it's generally around now, mid-October, which is the very end of fishing season. The weather is cooler and usually wetter. It's not a holiday and it's well into the school year, so there's no families on vacation. It's also the very beginning of hunting season, so most people have entirely moved off the water and into the woods. It's better trout weather too. Brook trout like cold water and are currently gorging themselves before winter sets in. If you've ever caught a male brookie in October, you'll see they have their rich orange bellies and a hooked salmon-like jaw, ready for breeding. Really gorgeous fish. This year my dad and I did not plan an October fishing weekend. We went up in July instead, just to try bass season for a change, and the excitement of landing fish after fish almost outweighed the sunburn I got on the river. But I figured, well, I have some time off work. My husband is distracted with the new Battlefield game. I like my alone time. Fall in the Great North Woods is stunningly beautiful, as any leaf peeper can tell you. I could only justify taking one night off work, so I planned a condensed version of our usual long weekend. Today I drove up to my grandmother's place on the VT-NH border, went up Route 1002, crossed a covered bridge into New Hampshire, came down Route 3. I also stopped at the sign for the 45th parallel, marking the halfway point between the equator and the North Pole. I passed the church my parents had been married in. Tomorrow I'd wake up before sunrise, grab breakfast at the diner, and head out towards Pittsburgh for some of the ponds and lakes I'd been going to for 15 years. Lunch on the shore of 2nd Connecticut maybe. Head home after that. But anyway, today. Route 3 is long stretches of cow pasture and cornfields, occasionally dotted with old, decrepit houses, shingles missing and siding, sun-bleached and sagging porches overflowing with broken furniture and dirty children's toys. No one would call this area prosperous, and it has the feeling that it once relied on some industry which has since passed its heyday. I don't know what it might have been, if it was agriculture or logging or something else. I'm a city girl. I don't know what rural towns depend on. There are a few spots along the road that I know I can stop and fish, and more that look promising but would require climbing one of those sagging porches to knock on a chipped paint door and ask the landowner if I could cross their field to the river. My dad has done it before, but that's not my style. This isn't the sort of place where I'd worry about being greeted by a shotgun through the mail slot. I'm just not the most social. I'd rather pull over somewhere I've been before. There's one spot where the river curves close to the road, where you can pull over and clamber down a moderately steep 10 feet to the bank. I remembered my dad showing me the spot in July, saying he used to have to drag a pontoon boat out here and up to the road when he did float trips 30 years ago. I don't have a boat, thank God, just waders, a vest, and my rod. My little Camry looked diminutive, parked in the dirt beside the road, out of place in a spot that usually would hold a mud-splattered pickup. It was good fishing weather, the sky gray and the cold wind making me shiver a little, even in my flannel shirt and windbreaker. A bird of prey circled overhead and I fumbled for my phone to get a picture. Like I said, I grew up in the city, so I still get a thrill out of seeing a bald eagle or a red-tailed hawk. When I pulled up at my grandmother's house earlier, there was a deer in the field that passed for a front lawn, and I stood outside for 5 straight minutes just to watch her. I shoved my car keys and phone in the zippered chest pouch of my waders and shuffled down the incline with my rod. Recently, my dad and I got into this type of fly fishing called tenkara, and the rod has a bunch of short sections that telescope out to a full 11 feet and can collapse down to 1 foot, so much easier to wander around with than my old 9'5" weight. You don't even need a reel, so you don't have to cast traditionally, just flick the line upstream like you're Euro-nymphing. I'm sure that reads like incomprehensible garbage to most people. I don't get a chance to talk much about this hobby, and I figure if any of you have been along Route 3, you might have fished there too, and might be interested in trying something new. The water level of the river is lower than it usually would be, since apparently it's been a dry year, which also explains how the trees are already bare of brown leaves. Not a good foliage year, sadly. That said, the wind left the surface choppy, which was good for me, and I leaned against a tree to slowly, with an embarrassing degree of difficulty, tie a fly onto my line. For the fisherman, I went with the size 12 leech pattern, soft olive marabou with a thick bead head. When I finally looked up, I almost jumped to see an older man stepping out of the river. He was dressed similarly to me, waders belted at the waist, a hat with the brim pulled low over his brow, sunglasses with polarized lenses that hid his eyes. His cheeks were red. There was something off about his appearance, but I couldn't place it immediately. "Any luck out there?" I said. Now, I know I said earlier that I'm not social, and I'm not. But asking another fisherman if they've had any luck is sort of equivalent to asking the grocery store cashier how their day has been. It's casual, common, and not expected to lead to anything long or deep. It's just polite. The man nodded and patted a small wicker basket hooked to his belt, a surprisingly old-fashioned piece of gear. A look I sort of associated with the same turn-of-the-century aesthetic as a doctor's bag with vials from an apothecary. River water dripped from the bottom, and so did blood. I kept my face blank. I'd always fished strictly catch and release, partly because most of the lakes and ponds in the area had that as a posted legal requirement, partly because, I'd feel bad killing a fish. I'm not vegetarian or anything, but I've worked with animals for years, and there's a huge difference between assisting with humane euthanasia and letting a fish slowly suffocate in open air. 7 rainbows, lucky number. "Well, hope you saved some for me," I said with a little laugh. It was a total dad comment, a joke that's not really a joke, but I thought it was the kind of comment where he'd nod politely, or maybe wish me good luck. I'd say thanks and nod back, and that would be it. Instead, he looked me over. "No basket?" he asked. "Got a bag or something?" "I don't usually catch anything," I said with a polite smile. "If I do, I'll put it back anyway." He frowned then, the kind of frown that transforms a face even with half of it obscured by his glasses and hat. I had that gnawing sensation of all awkward people, that I'd messed up a normal conversation somehow and didn't know how to fix it. "Oh, never release a fish you catch," he said, his voice gravelly, a smoker's voice. "Cruelest thing you can do. God, I did not want to have this conversation. I don't know how much pain fish feel when they're caught. Honestly, I try not to think about it too much, but I don't like debating sensitive topics with strangers. I'd say, does anyone but enough strangers try to start those conversations with me that I guess they do?" "Really?" I asked. Older men usually respond well when you ask them to impart some wisdom upon you. Why is that? Causing pain for no reason? If you're lucky, your hook just tears their lips up something fierce. If you're not, they swallow the hook and you gotta rip it out. Might be the hook catches an eye. He pointed at his own, like I might not be sure where the eye was. And the stress of fighting them when you bring him in half kills him anyway. Better you just. He smashed his fist down on a flat palm and end it. Merciful that way. Did you have to bash their heads in? I didn't know, but it seemed gruesome. That makes sense, I said, as neutrally as possible, and I shifted my weight uncomfortably. Do you believe in karma, young lady? No, I thought. Sure, I said. Well, he said, shaking his finger, you give an animal a good, merciful death, then someday you'll get one yourself. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the wind picking up. I couldn't think how to deal with that belief, so I demurred again. Well, I'm only up here till tomorrow, and I'm, not very lucky, so I doubt I'll even get a bite, I said. I realized I was worrying the marabou of the leech with my fingertips. Oh, not local? He asked, suddenly friendly again. I explained that no, I'm from Massachusetts, just up staying at my grandmother's house. I usually come up with my dad, but he had to work, I said, as if the indication that this was a shared hobby for family bonding purposes would explain why I'm not very good at it. Well, let me give you a little more advice, he said. When you go back later, go into town, and you can get down to the river if you go behind the basketball court. You know that old metal railroad bridge? I nodded. Good fishing there lately. Give it a shot. And swap out that fly. He nodded at the one in my hand. Baby brook trout pattern. You have one of those? Yes, I said. I didn't know if I did, but I also didn't want to argue about it. They've been hitting that like crazy the past few days. That wasn't a surprise. This time of year and preparing for winter, a trout will eat anything, including smaller trout. Grim, but that's nature. It's that time of year, I said with half a shrug and half a laugh. Anything will turn cannibal under the right circumstances. We all gotta eat. He held up both hands in a "what are you gonna do" expression, and I realized what felt off about his appearance. He came straight from the river, but he didn't have a rod with him, just a wading staff clipped to his belt and the still dripping basket. Good luck out there, young lady. Before I could say anything beside an awkward thanks, he climbed the incline and started walking down the road. I watched until he was out of sight, then kept watching for another few minutes to make sure he wasn't coming back, before I finished assembling my rod and waded out into the river. I didn't change my fly to a baby brook trout pattern, and I also didn't get any hits, which is typical for me. I struggled to keep my balance when the water went any higher than my ankles. My fly kept catching on rocks and debris, and I glanced back every few minutes to see if the fisherman was watching me. I didn't see him again, but the hairs on the back of my neck stayed raised for 20 minutes after I gave up on this spot and drove away. I got dinner at a Chinese place and let myself enjoy the nostalgia of being back in this town I'd been so often with my dad. There was the ice cream store that used to have a movie rental in the back, across the street from the vacant storefront that used to be a French bakery. Around the corner was where our car had broken down years and years ago. I like well-worn memories of familiar places, like perfectly broken and blue jeans. I admit that after dinner, I did take the old fisherman's advice about the railroad bridge behind the basketball court. Fishermen are notoriously protective of their successful fishing spots. I wasn't going to turn down a potentially hot tip. I even caught a rainbow trout, a slim little 6-incher that photographed embarrassingly small in my hand. I let it go, though. I hate the idea of killing a fish and not even knowing what to do with it afterwards. Anyway, I'm in bed now, under a pile of scratchy polyester blankets. The internet is kind of patchy upstairs, but I think writing this out has made me feel better about that interaction. I mean, it's a little funny to hope for some river runs through it wisdom and get a weird lecture about merciful death and cannibalism, right? Funny in a bleak kind of way. I will say, thinking back, I don't remember telling him where my grandmother's house is, so I don't know how he knew to tell me about the spot behind the basketball court. I get anxious talking to strangers, though, and I don't always have the best memory when I get anxious. And it's a rural area, but not only one town in 50 miles. Kind of rural, so I must have mentioned something. So have any of you guys ever met a fisherman on Route 3? Did he tell you anything weird like he told me? And while I'm asking, like I said, I'm a city girl. I don't really know what wildlife habits are normal. The deer I saw this morning is still in the same spot in the front field. Is it normal for deer to just stay there like that? And is it normal that every time I glance out the window, she's staring right at me?